if you can transfer all of that to the leaders in your life, or if you are a leader and you have a challenge listening well, we want to just talk about what happens when leaders don't listen. And remember, throughout the series, we've talked about everyone is a leader. So it's not just that whoever you're thinking about when you think of a leader, think of yourself as we move through this series, move through this message today, because everyone is a leader in their own function. You're a leader in whatever area that you're actually called to, the things that you do well. You really are a leader in that space. And so we need to learn how to be a leader. Now, we've gone through 7 previous messages, and so I just want to do a little bit of review on each one of them. On Growing Transformational Leaders 1, we talked about discovering the leader within. You are a leader, and that's what we talked about. You are a leader personally on the inside. Most of us are not comfortable with calling ourselves a leader, and hopefully you are more comfortable today calling yourself a leader than you were 8 weeks ago when we started the series, because God has created in each one of us and each one of you the ability to lead, and not just the ability, but the responsibility to lead. In part 2, we talked about the leader's mindset, and that is whatever you think about yourself as a leader, whatever your mindset of yourself, that's your mindset. So you need to identify where you are, where you're stuck, where the things that you think of yourself and what you think you can and can't do, and then grow from that place, grow out of that place, but own it, accept it, realize and recognize this is where I am, but be ready to move and grow from that place because you need a new mindset. Part 3, we talked about navigating uncertainty, where everyone has some uncertainty. Although leaders like to think they know everything, if you got a leader who thinks they know everything and they pretend to know everything, they're faking, because no leader knows everything. So what do you do when there is uncertainty? What do you do when you don't know what to do? In that message, when we talked about this, we talked about Jesus and the disciples. They were so uncertain. Jesus was on the boat with them, and the winds came up and the storm came up. And in the middle of that storm, they actually thought they were going to die. And they called on Jesus to save them. And Jesus just woke up and said, well, why are you so afraid? In other words, I am here with you. It's not like he was not on the boat. But even in those situations, I'm sure you would and I would also be. Even if Jesus was right here and the same things were happening, I would be wondering, why is Jesus not doing something? And sometimes you're wondering the same things about the storms in your life, and that is, why isn't Jesus doing something about what's going on right now? And so refocus your attention from the storms that's going on in your life to the relationship that you have with the person who can control all of it, including the storm. That's what navigating uncertainty was all about. Part 4, we talked about discovering me. We had a guest, remember Brian Spencer? And Brian, one of the things that he talked to us about in discovering ourselves was, don't be afraid to taste. Don't be afraid as you discover who you are, the things in your life that your passions that you have. As you discover them, go ahead. Remember the analogy he gave was he said he wrote this book, part of this book, sitting in a coffee shop, and he was just thinking about all the different flavors of coffee. And so all of the different flavors of that you have on the inside of you, don't be afraid to just taste and find out the uniqueness of each one of those on your tongue. Find out who you are by discovering it and going ahead and launching into it. That was part 4 of Leadership Series. And then part 5, Brian came back and talked to us about your exceptional self. And that is, you got to find out, when you discover who you are, you got to unearth whatever it is that's hiding on the inside. Unearth it, and when you unearth it, there's going to be some good and there's going to be some bad. And when that comes out, embrace whatever it is. Embrace the good, embrace the bad, even though you don't like the bad. Learn about it. Learn about whatever is negative is going on in your life. Learn about all of the things that you don't like about yourself. Learn about it, and then celebrate those things that are great. And this is where you can grow from. This is the treasure of your exceptionality. Trust me, everything that you have as a weakness, there is an alternate strength. In other words, the weakness that you have is the opposite of some strength. If you can lock into that strength that you have, then you can show that part of yourself and celebrate that. Sometimes we work so hard on our weaknesses that we don't even need to do anything with our strengths. And so expose your strengths to who you are and expose everyone else to the strengths that you are. Recognize where you're weak and move on. And that's your exceptional self. And then part 6, a couple of weeks ago, we talked about changing lives through inspiration and empathy, the need for empathy within leaders. Remember, a lot of leaders, they lead, they really just rule, and with no connection to the people that they are leading. It's just, this is the way it is, this is the law. It's like, these are the rules. And there's some good information about this in some of the books that I've read, but some people are like this. They just want to know the rules so they can know how much to do to keep the rules, but there's no relationship. If there's a lot of rules, there's little relationship. But where you have a lot of relationship, you don't need a lot of rules. And so when you are leading, we need to learn to lead with inspiration. That's what I call inside out, where you can inspire someone from the inside instead of giving them a rule of what to do on the outside. Inspire them from the inside, and that's customized. That's what I call individualized and customized emotional support to each person, to every follower, while they're developing and empowering themselves. And this is what a real leader does, is on the inside, he inspires a person to change, inspires a person to grow, instead of giving demands of what the rules are to follow to get to the next step. And then last week, we talked about emotional fitness, whereas your emotional quotient, where your EQ is more important than your IQ when it comes to leadership these days, because there needs to be relationship. And again, we're talking about providing the empathy a person needs, providing the emotional care that a person needs, providing all of that relationship that connects a leader with the followers. And the reason is, when you're connecting leaders with a follower, remember from our first message, every follower is also what? A leader. So you are leading leaders. And when we learn to emotionally connect and use that emotion, use the relationship part of who we are, we can move forward with the things that God has given you, the dreams that you have, whatever the vision is that you have. We can move forward with that. Then part 8, which is today, we're going to talk about leaders recognizing the knowledge and wisdom that's required by not talking, but listening. We gain knowledge not by talking. We gain knowledge and wisdom by what? Listening. And leaders, because we are leaders, we think we probably know more than the other people anyway. And so we think that we should be talking and everyone else should be listening. And if you're a leader, you probably can relate to that. But that's how leaders think. We think that's why I'm a leader. I know what I'm doing, and people recognize it, so I'm a leader, so I should be talking. But great leaders recognize that instead of doing all the talking to gain knowledge and wisdom, you've got to do some listening. So I have a few questions for you. Number one, when you are a leader, do you think it is more important to be heard or more important for you to hear? Oh, you just said that because of what I just said. How do you know that's the right answer? Is that really true? If the leaders in your life, your boss, your manager, your CEO, do you feel like they feel that it's more important to be heard or more important for them to hear? Okay. And we're going to talk about a leader that's our character for today. But here's another question. Why is outside evaluation and not just self-evaluation so important to being a leader? Sometimes we evaluate ourselves and we feel like I know what's missing and I can make a change, and then we don't want anybody from the outside telling us what to do or giving us any input, and we don't invite it. But why is outside evaluation just as important, or even more important to a leader than self-evaluation? That's something to think about today, because here's the purpose of listening and the purpose of communicating. The real purpose of being a great communicator is not to get your clear message across. Sometimes that's what leaders feel like. If I'm a good leader, if I can communicate and get my message out real clearly. But the purpose of even the clear message is not just so you got it off. Sometimes we feel good just to get the message out. But the purpose is not just to get the message out. The purpose is to engage with the listeners, engage with the heart of the listeners, engage with the minds of the listeners. And when you engage with the listeners and with their heart and with their mind, then they can also take ownership of the vision that you have, whatever the business is, once you engage. But if you're just thinking that when you say it, that you're going to create loyal followers just because of what you say, no, but loyalty doesn't work that way. People don't just buy into what you're saying just because of what you're saying. You've got to be able to engage. And so I want to take a look at one of the wisest men that ever walked the earth. You know him if you're Bible scholars, many of you who've read your Bibles. Solomon, who was the wisest man that ever lived. We're going to talk about some things that he said about listening. And think about this, though. If Solomon was the wisest man, why is he telling us about listening? Because he surrounded himself with advisors. He surrounded himself, so he listened. So here's one of the things that Solomon said in the first chapter of Proverbs. He said, let the wise listen and add to their learning, and let the discerning get guidance. So if you want to be wise, you need to listen. And that will add to your learning. So whatever learning you have, whatever wisdom you have, as you listen, you will gain more wisdom. And then he said, let the discerning get guidance. If you need guidance, then you need to discern that you need some guidance. And don't be like the people who won't ask for it. Ask for it. Get the guidance that you need. That's the first thing. And there's about 4 things here that we're going to talk about that Solomon said concerning listening. Then we're going to look at an example of a person, a king, who would not listen. So the next thing Solomon says in the 12th chapter, he said, the way of fools seem right to them, but the wise do what? They listen. They listen to advice. But isn't it true, even if you don't consider yourself a fool, most of us don't, right? Even if you don't consider yourself a fool, if you think about people that you maybe think that are fools or is a fool, my daddy could say that too. Now that's a fool. You could say that so easily. But the way of a fool seem right to them. Think about this. Whatever a person is doing that you think is foolish, it does seem right to them. It makes perfect sense to them. But not you, and you see that as foolish. He says, but the wise will listen. So the difference is, if something seems right, don't cut off information. Listen so that you can hear input and determine if it's going to be good for you long term or not. So the way of a fool seems right to them, but the wise, they listen to advice. The third thing he says is this. He said, plans fail for a lack of counsel, but with many advisors they succeed. How many of you have ever made plans and you thought you had everything just the way you needed it to be? And many of you who are working with us on the project of this next building, you can sense what we're talking about. We have plans, but you need counsel. You need other input. You need people putting in. There were things that we thought we could do. We were ready to go. We said, wow, we think we'll be in there in 4, 5, 6 weeks for sure. No later, boom, we'll be in. Then we had to get some counsel and realize that with many advisors, we can succeed. But if we had just gone forth with what we were thinking, down the line, we would have run into some things. But plans fail for a lack of counsel. So get the counsel that you need. Don't feel like if you need counsel, even in a business situation, sometimes we think in a personal situation, if you need a counselor, we feel like something's wrong with us. We need to get rid of that stinking thinking. There's nothing wrong with you because you seek counsel. This is the smartest man, the wisest man on the planet. He said, plans fail for a lack of counsel, but with many advisors, they succeed. And then finally, one of the things he says in the 19th chapter is this: listen to advice and accept discipline, and at the end, you will be counted among the wise. So listen to advice. Open your ear and your heart to advice. Accept the discipline. Accept what you need to do to change, what you need to own it. Whatever it is you need to make a difference, own it, accept it, and create a discipline for yourself so that you can align yourself with what you're hearing. And then at the end, you will be counted among the wise. Now, this is what Solomon said. Now, Solomon, let me give you a little history. Solomon was the third king of Israel. Remember, Saul was the first king of Israel. And David was the second king. Saul, who didn't obey God, and God sought out David, a man after his own heart. David became king of Israel somewhere around 1010 BC. So think about this. Around 1010 BC, David became king of Israel. And they started off with a divided kingdom then, where Judah, they were accepting David. David was from the tribe of Judah. Then the rest of Israel didn't accept. They wanted to still be of the house of Saul. But David eventually became the king of a united kingdom of all 12 tribes of Israel. David was the king. And then David had multiple sons, but Solomon was a choice to be the next leader and the next king. And David was king from 1010 to about 970, and then Solomon became king after David passed away. Solomon was about 20 years old when he became king, and both Solomon and David reigned in their kingship for about 40 years each. And while they were king, that was the only time there was a united kingdom of all 12 tribes. Solomon, when he died, his son, who became king, who was designed to be king. Check this out. We're going to talk about this today. His son is the king that we're talking about who didn't listen. On the day of his inauguration, when he was to be made king and accepted by everybody, we're going to look at what he did to not listen. So every leader, this is what I want to say as I move into this, every leader should be willing to submit herself to the counsel of others. Every leader. And I know you're saying, why has it got to be a herself? I know I heard that in the back of your mind. But whether it's herself, himself, to the counsel of other leaders, each one of us, we should be willing to submit ourselves to the counsel of others. So when leaders don't listen, then things happen that take you way out from wherever the plan was, way away from the dream, way away from the vision. And so in the book of 1 Kings, where this is recorded concerning Rehoboam, who was Solomon's son. So if you want to take a look there, it's the 12th chapter of 1 Kings. So 1 Kings, 12th chapter, Rehoboam went to Shechem, where all Israel had gathered to make him king. So let's let me give you a little history here. Rehoboam had been in Egypt. This is Solomon's son, and the relationship between him and his dad wasn't much different than David and some of his other sons. He was actually running from his dad. He was staying out of his dad's sight. But he still was in line to be the king. But he's in Egypt, away from Solomon. Solomon, at this time, he had become so rigid, almost like crazy. All the things we just said, this is the stuff he stopped doing as he got older. He stopped listening. He just wanted to build his kingdom, and he had 700 wives, 300 concubines, and he was building cities and temples for the women in his life. He was just not even listening to God anymore. He had just lost it. And as far as his relationship with the people around him, he just wanted to build the cities, build a king. The people had to pay huge amounts of taxes, so they didn't like him anymore. Think about this. This is the king, and now nobody likes him. He's been king for almost 40 years now, and nobody likes him anymore because it seems like he's such a mean old man who just wants things done. And this is what he turned into. And so Rehoboam, his son, left. He went to Egypt. Seems like that's where everybody go to get a little peace. They go to Egypt. He went to Egypt. So now Solomon dies, and he comes from Egypt to Shechem, where all Israel had gathered to make him king. They're saying, you're next in line to be the king. Solomon is dead, and so come on, and let's do this. So the next verse says, when Jeroboam, son of Nebat, heard of this, now Jeroboam, don't let these names get you all mixed up. Rehoboam was Solomon's son. Jeroboam was Solomon's worker, that all the people that did all the hard labor, he was the hard labor taskmaster. So he knows Rehoboam's dad. And when Jeroboam, son of Nebat, heard of this, he returned from Egypt, for he had fled to Egypt to escape from King Solomon. Now, as he comes back, the leaders of Israel says to Jeroboam, you're back, and Rehoboam is about to be king. We want to get a word in to Solomon's son, Rehoboam, before he starts. And so when Jeroboam, son of Nebat, heard of this, go ahead to the next verse for me. The leaders of Israel, they summoned Jeroboam, and the whole assembly of Israel went to speak with Rehoboam. So they went to talk to the new king. So they come to the new king, and their spokesperson is Rehoboam, who knew Solomon, who had ran to Egypt, and now they've said, come on back, we need a spokesperson because now his son is in charge. And so they go to him with this request. The fourth verse says, your father was a hard master. So they asked him, they said, please, lighten the load, lighten the harsh labor demands and heavy taxes that your father imposed on us, then we will be your loyal subjects. So they're saying to him, just give us some space, man. Solomon has had us working all these years, building all this stuff. He's driving us crazy with taxes and the amount of work. Now that you're a king, can you just back off a little and give us a little space? So here's what Rehoboam said to them. He said, well, give me 3 days to think this over, then come back for my answer. So the people went away. So far, seems like this new king is doing the right thing. He's saying, give me some time to think about it and come back in 3 days and I'll give you my answer. So look at what he did next. Then King Rehoboam discussed the matter with the older men who had counseled his father Solomon. That sounds like a noble thing to do, right? He's got some counselors, the elders. He's listening to the elders. He said, what is your advice? How should I answer these people? So he's the new king. His dad had trained him well. Listen to the advisors. Get input from the advisors. So here's what the older men told him. The older counselors, they said, if you're willing to be a servant, now check this out, because this is so key for leadership, for great leadership. He said, if you are willing to be a servant to these people today and give them a favorable answer, they will always be your loyal subjects. In other words, if you will listen to these people and serve them, and this is a big difference. Too many leaders don't see themselves as servants. Leaders lead out of servitude to God. So you're serving. If you're a leader, you are serving. But you will see here as we move forward, I don't think that's what Rehoboam had in mind. It says, but Rehoboam rejected the advice of the older men and instead asked the opinion of the young men who had grown up with him and were now his advisors. So he's got some young advisors who, like him, they are just like most young people, today, who don't have, wisdom comes with age. You don't just wake up and become wise. So if there are people who have information, you need to latch on to that so that you can gain some information. He rejected all the advice of the people who had wisdom and decided to ask people who had no wisdom. So he said to them, to these young men, what is your advice? How should I answer these people who want me to lighten their burdens and whatever my father has imposed on them? What do you think I should do? Now, he'd already gotten information from the older, wiser men. So here's what the young men said. They said what probably almost any new person in an administration would do. See, when you get new people in an administration who've never been in the administration before, they just want to be whatever they can be to the leader so that the leader will look to them. And when you get people like that in an administration, that entire administration is in trouble because nobody knows what they're doing. Nobody's listening to anybody. Everybody thinks they know what's going to happen. They know what's best, and if they know what's best, they don't want to listen to anybody else. So here's what the young men said. This is what you should tell those complainers. They call them complainers, who want a lightened burden. Tell them, my little finger is thicker than my father's waist. You think you had it bad with him, I'm going to make it worse. He said, yes, my father laid heavy burdens on you, but I'm going to make them even heavier. My father beat you with whips, but I'm going to beat you with scorpions. I'm going to beat you with chains. I'm going to make it even worse for you. So this is the advice he's getting from the young men. What do you think he did? Well, he gave them 3 days, like he said. So 3 days later, Jeroboam and all the people, Jeroboam, remember, is the spokesman for the people. They all come back to Rehoboam to hear his decision. Just as he had said, I'll come back in 3 days and I'll tell you what I'm going to do. So they all come back 3 days later. And here's what Rehoboam the king said. Rehoboam spoke harshly to the people, for he rejected the advice of the older counselors and followed the counsel of his younger advisors. He told the people the exact same thing that the young men told him to say, and that is that you think you had it bad now, it's going to be worse. My little finger is bigger than my dad's waist, so I'm going to make it that much more harder for you. So the king paid no attention to the people. This turn of events was the will of the Lord. Now we need to understand this, because one thing that had happened, because Rehoboam's father Solomon had disobeyed God, God had already given, he said, because of this, I'm going to take the kingdom from Solomon, but I'm not going to do it during Solomon's lifetime. I'm going to wait until the son is king. I'm not going to take it from Solomon during his lifetime because of my respect for his dad, David, who obeyed me. And so Solomon is king. Solomon messed up big time, but God just had allowed grace to stay on him and his kingdom until it was out of his hands. And now that Rehoboam is king, it was God's plan to rip the kingdom from him. So look at how it happens. And so the king paid no attention to them, and the message, through the king paid no attention to the people. This turn of events was the will of the Lord, for it fulfilled the Lord's message to Jeroboam, son of Nebat, through the prophet Ahijah. Ahijah had already prophesied to Jeroboam and told him, he said, Ahijah the priest, he had on his new garment, and he took his new garment and tore it into 10 pieces and said, the Lord says, of the 12 tribes of Israel, 10 of these tribes are going to be yours. This was the prophecy. So here's how it's happening afterwards. When Jeroboam goes and talks to Rehoboam with the people to say, would you lighten our load? And he said, no. Look at what Israel did. When all Israel realized that the king had refused to listen, say refused to listen. When the king had refused to listen to them, they responded. See, sometimes we think, hold on before we show them the response. They responded. Sometimes we think that just because people follow, that they're always going to respond the way you think they should because you are the king or you are the leader. Think about it. Followers are volunteers. Followers are volunteers. They don't have to do what you say. You ain't nobody's daddy. They don't have to follow. Followers, the word follow means in itself, it means that there's some willingness. The person has made a choice. If they're following, they have made a choice. If you're a leader and you want people to follow you, you got to engage with the people. You don't set up rules and demands and think that they're just going to follow and obey what you say. Even, excuse me, I think I need a drink of water after saying. Even if they just do what you say, that doesn't mean they're following. You have no loyalty. You just have subjects who are obeying for a time period. It's just like if you were paying someone and you are just ruling and there's no relationship, and they're just waiting for another opportunity to do the same thing for somebody else, maybe for another $1 an hour, 50 cents an hour. In some cases, they'll take a cut to get away from you. Because you're not leading. You're just trying to rule people. So when all Israel realized that the king had refused to listen to them, here's what their response was. They said, down with the dynasty of David. This is 10 of 12 tribes. They said, down with the... Now, we could think of some other words that they would have said. And I'm not going to say them. But down with the dynasty of David. We have no interest in the son of Jesse. At least it's called him by his granddaddy's name instead of something else. The son of Jesse, not some other son. Down with the dynasty of David. We have no interest in the son of Jesse, who was David's dad, which is, Solomon's granddaddy, and this is Rehoboam's great-granddaddy. They just out with the whole, we don't even care about the lineage anymore. Away with all of y'all. And he says to them, back to your homes, O Israel. Look out for your own house, O David. So the people of Israel returned home. Now look at what Rehoboam did. Here's what Rehoboam did. But Rehoboam continued to rule, and remember, not lead. He continued to rule over the Israelites who lived in the town of Judah. So that one tribe, the tribe of Judah, he continued to rule there. And look at what happened next. He still wants the rest of his kingdom back. So King Rehoboam sent Adoniram, who was in charge of the forced labor, to restore order, put the people of Israel, but the people of Israel stoned him to death. He sent them down there to get the kingdom back. They stoned him. They killed him. And when you kill the representative that a king sent, the king know that he's next. So King Rehoboam, once he sent him and they stoned him, let's go to the next verse. And to this day, the northern tribes of Israel have refused to be ruled by a descendant of David. You want no part of that kingdom of Judah, just because the king would not listen to the people. So, what did the rest of this kingdom do that were a part of this united kingdom? They've separated themselves now. Let's take a look. When the people of Israel learned of Jeroboam's return from Egypt, they called an assembly and made him king over all of Israel. So Rehoboam, Solomon's son, was just the king of Judah. Now, Jeroboam, who was Solomon's, this was the man that worked for Solomon, that was afraid of Solomon. He called assembly and made him king over all the rest of Israel, outside of the lineage. And this is where I think God has like a sense of humor, because the biggest portion of Israel's kingdom is not even where Jesus came from. Jesus came out of the tribe of Judah, which was the tribe that didn't listen to the people. Isn't that amazing? Seems like they would have picked the good side for him. But they picked, I don't know if you call it the bad side. It was Judah. We talk about Judah, the tribe of Judah, like tribe of Judah, yay! Them were some terrible people. So, only the tribe of Judah remained loyal to the family of David. All of the rest of Israel got them a new king and followed a whole new kingdom all the way through, because the king wouldn't listen. So what are you losing today because you're not listening? What kingdom, what are you forfeiting? What are you letting go of that should be a part? I mean, Rehoboam could have been the king of Israel forever, and his lineage, his people, all the way down, of the entire kingdom, instead of just one kingdom, instead of just one tribe or two tribes, Judah. So here's our challenge today, as we move through this and as we move away from this series. First thing is to identify someone. This is your challenge. Identify someone or several people, whatever you need, but to consider them to be a leader in a leadership area that you have a concern with, whatever area, even if you're a parent today or a grandparent, and look at other people that you see who have done that well, who was a good leader in that area. But your challenge is to identify someone or several people that you consider to be a leader in that area and that concerns you. And then while considering yourself a leader, because we all are leaders, while considering yourself to be a leader, ask that person to evaluate you and help close the gap between your God-given potential and your current performance. That's what you need a coach for. A person, you have this potential that God has given you, but you're performing down here. So there's a gap. You need someone to help you to close that gap. And when you reach outside of yourself for some help outside, then you can get some help to close that gap. One of the things that I have done, we've done as an organization anyway, we have a board of directors that advise me as a leader, but I've also, legally, we have an accountability board that board can even go to if somehow I lose my mind and still go crazy and do some stuff. Another accountability board. But most of the men that I have asked to serve on that board, with this message and with this series, I'm beginning to reach out to them in each one different areas that I should be leading in and ask them to evaluate me in that area of leadership so that I can get some feedback from them, and not just from them, but also from you. It's just like having customers. You need feedback from your customers, or you're not going. Your competition is going to blow you away. You need some feedback. So invite some people to give you some feedback to close that gap of what you're potentially good at and your actual performance. And so here's some action steps to do that with. Number one, if you want others to listen to you, then you got to give others the courtesy of listening to them. If you want others to listen to you, sometimes we, as leaders, we think that everyone else should just listen because I'm the leader. You may be, you may be the one that's at the top of the org chart, but you are all together. Everyone is a leader, and you need to listen to others just like you want them to listen to you. Number two, don't just listen to have your opinion validated or just to stroke your own ego. Sometimes that's what leaders do, is they listen to others just because the person is saying what they want to hear. Don't do that if you're the leader. Don't just listen to people who's singing your song. Listen to get opposition even so that you'll know what you're up against. But listen. And number three, you should never be too busy to listen. Knowledge and wisdom, they are gained from multiple sources. Sometimes we feel like we're too busy if the person is not a superior. If they're above us, we listen. But if they're subordinate, then we can be too busy. So don't ever be too busy, because your information could come from any and every different source. Then number four, listen to nonverbals. This is very key, very important. Nonverbal, when people have expressions that, well, here's the key. Most people will not overtly disagree with you. Most people won't just out and openly disagree. They won't out and openly share their opposition, but they will almost always give a clear message of their nonverbal expression. You will know. Sometimes their eyes roll. Sometimes their head rolls. Sometimes they just close their eyes. Sometimes they just turn around. Sometimes they just say, "Here we go again." But if you have people doing that, you need to listen to that, because there's a message in that. And you need to respond as a leader, not check them and say, "Hey," just like you would for your kid. How many of you had a kid or a grandkid who do that to you? They're like, "Oh." and you're ready to grab them in their collar, break all your fingernails, and shake them up a little. But we need to learn to listen, because whatever they just did, there's a reason. There's a message there. You need to hear that. And you need to be big enough to hear it without going off and losing your own mind and losing the whole vision. So listen to nonverbals. Don't just challenge them and try to make people straighten up. We want people to just act right even if their heart is not there. We need to listen to their heart so that their heart can become right, not just their performance and not just the behavior. We just want good behavior. It's like, you better act like you hear me. Well, if you want people to really hear you, you need to connect to their heart, not just make them act like they hear you. Number 5, remember, listening is one of the first indications and opportunities to show respect. So if we want to respect people, we want people to know, people want to be respected. That's one of the important parts of relationship, is to know that I'm respected. Because if I don't think you respect me, I am probably not really going to listen to you. If you have no respect for me, I may try hard, but I've got to come up with some effort in order to hear you. If you don't respect me, I got to use extra effort. It's kind of like loving somebody just to go to heaven. You know, it's not easy loving you, but since I want to go to heaven, I'm going to love you. Which means you really don't love them. You're just saying that so that you can convince yourself that you're abiding by the scripture, so you think you're going to heaven. We need to learn to love, and we need to learn how to respect people. Number 6, find someone to observe you in a few of your leadership settings, whatever they may be. And each one of us have different settings that we are a leader in, and we also need some kind of coach in. Invite their input, that person that you've chosen, invite their input to inform your qualities, your leadership qualities. And the type of person you want to find here is find someone who actually cares about you, who you know cares about you, but can also be brutally honest with you. They can tell you the truth. Find someone that can tell you the truth, but that person has your best interest at heart. And then this is the last part of this, and this is what's really so key. Then make sure that that person can put themselves not into your shoes, but into the shoes of the people that are influenced by you. The people that respond to your leadership. Make sure that that person that you invite to advise you can put themselves into the shoes of the people that respond to your leadership, so that they can actually see what the other persons are feeling, know what the other persons are seeing, and get them to respond to that. So that was our series for the entire summer, and we want to work through some things. We're going to be talking, remember Brian, who was here a few weeks ago, and some other leaders, so that we can have some kind of workshops and some group sessions where we can work through some of these things, and you can actually put them into place in your life, become great leaders in whatever area that you're in, wherever you are in business, whether you need to open your own business, desire to open your own business, or whatever, so that we can give you some skills to actually do that. And so that's the series. I want to pray for you now. But I also want to give you an opportunity, if you're listening to me today and you want to make a choice, make a decision about Grace Transformational Ministries, or about God, about Jesus. If you want to start a relationship with God, or you have questions about God that you're just not sure of, we want to answer any of your questions. We want to at least give you the environment and platform where you can ask those questions, and give you the opportunity to get those questions answered. And so if you're here today, we'll meet you at our starting point area. If you're online, you can go to our website, gtmusa.org, and then go to the part where it says online, contact us online, and then scroll down, and you can type in the information that you want, and we'll respond to you from there. But we want to say God bless you, and I want to pray for you today. And let's put this into practice. This is not just information, and this is not just for people that we think are leaders. This is for you because you are leaders. So let's pray. Father, we thank you today for your goodness, for your grace, and we thank you for this entire series. And we thank you for giving us a heart to listen, for giving us the heart of a leader. I pray now for every person who didn't see themselves as a leader, that we would recognize that you have called each of us to lead in the area that you've called us to, the area where we have skill, the area where we have expertise, where we become even greater in that area. And we just honor you and give you praise for that. In Jesus' name, amen. So have a great week. Hopefully you had a good summer, because fall is here.